I have been a slave myself. I know what slaves feel. I can tell by myself what other slaves feel and by what they have told me. The man that says slaves be quite happy in slavery, that they don't want to be free, that man is either ignorant or a lying person. I never heard a slave say so. This is slavery. I tell it to let English people know the truth, and I hope they will never leave off to pray God and call loud to the great King of England till all the poor blacks be given free and slavery done up forevermore. The history of Mary Prince, a West Indian slave. Mary Prince was born in Bermuda around 1788. Her mother was a slave, her father was a slave, and as such, she was born into a life of slavery. A life that many of us could not even imagine. A life that was hard, a life that was limited, a life that seemed predestined for misery. We are fortunate enough to know a great deal about Mary's life as a slave in Bermuda, Turks Island, and Antigua. We know that she was separated from her mother at the age of 12 and sold to the Ingham family in Spanish Point. We know that she ran away to escape their cruelty but was returned after only a few days. We know that she was sold later to a man named Mr. D who whisked her away on a sloop to Turks Island. We know that he forced her to strip naked for his pleasure and hung her by her wrists and beat her across her naked back. We also know that she was sold for a fourth and final time for the sum of 100 pounds to John Wood, who took her along with his family to Antigua, where she endured more hard work and brutal beatings. We know so much about Mary's life, and it's quite abnormal for a slave. The lives of slaves were not widely documented at that time, not in Bermuda or Turks or Antigua or anywhere for that matter. But we know so much about this one particular slave woman who lived and died almost 200 years ago, and we know it all because she told us. As fate would have it, Mary Prince ended up in London as a free woman working as a domestic in the home of Thomas Pringle, the secretary of the Anti-Slavery Society. While in London, Mary became part of the abolitionist movement and decided to tell her story. With the help of Thomas Pringle, Mary Prince wrote The History of Mary Prince, a West Indian Slave, and became the first female slave to record an autobiography of her life. We know the story of Mary Prince so intricately because Mary had the courage to tell it. Why is this so important? Why is Mary telling her story so courageous? Why does it matter? Well, first and quite simply, it matters because it had never been done before. Mary Prince is a trailblazer. When there was no one else that looked like her doing it, she showed up and she showed us how to tell our stories. Lack of education did not stop her. Lack of resources did not stop her. Mary Prince was fueled by a purpose greater than herself, and that purpose eliminated all limitations. So what can we learn from this incredible story of a slave girl born in Brackish Pond in Devonshire, sold 4 times to 4 masters, overworked, abused, beaten, exploited, yet finally ended up at the age of 45 in London playing a pivotal role in the abolitionist movement and ultimately the emancipation of slaves in the British Empire? What can we learn from her courage? What can we learn from her story? We can learn the value of giving a voice to your experience. Your experience is valid. Your experience is real. Your experience is valuable. But no one will know your experiences. No one will be impacted by them unless you give them a voice. Mary Prince could very well have lived and died without anyone ever knowing her name, just like the countless other Bermudian slaves who we know very, very little about. But Mary Prince is a national hero in this country because she gave a voice to her experiences. Mary Prince is studied in colleges across the globe because she gave a voice to her experiences. And because of that voice, we have a better understanding of slavery in this country and within the West Indies that we may have never otherwise had. Her experience validates the experiences of hundreds, maybe even thousands of female slaves spread across the diaspora who never had a voice. Women whose stories were never told, but their trauma transcends from generation to generation. And by telling her story, Mary Prince wrote her own history instead of allowing someone else to write it for her. She set the record straight and educated generations to come on the brutality of slavery. Like Mary, I decided to tell my story too. I decided to take all the pain that came from toxic relationships, drug abuse, depression, suicide, and channel it into something purposeful. I like to call myself an alchemist. I turn pain into purpose. I decided to write about it, and without really knowing who would read or what would come of it, I created a blog that shared my own story. My own story of barely escaping a prison sentence, becoming a single mother, and rebuilding my life. I tell my story of faith in the midst of adversity and how doing the work to heal from trauma unlocks the door to absolute joy and freedom. Telling my story saved me back then, and it continues to save me every single day. It gives me a purpose so much greater than myself, and every day I am reminded that someone, somewhere, needs my story. Someone finds hope in the pages of my life. I don't know where this story is going to take me. I don't know how my story ends. I just know that it's a story worth telling because it's a story of triumph in the face of tragedy. When we tell our stories, our heartbreaking, soul-wrenching stories, we give that pain a purpose. We transmute the pain into power, and we use that power to change ourselves, to change our lives, and to ultimately change the world around us. By taking an energy that was meant to destroy us and turning it into something great, we change the algorithm. We change the outcome. And what was originally intended to break us becomes the very core of our strength. In June 2012, Mary Prince was inducted as the 5th national hero for this country, all because she told her story. I wonder how she would have felt knowing that her impact and legacy still lives on almost 200 years after telling her story. I wonder if she knew that we would honor her for her courage. I wonder if she knew that we would find our identities in the pages of her life. I wonder if she knew that little brown girls would read about her in classrooms and know that they can change the world just like she did. Did Mary know that we would understand our own history better after reading her story? After reading about the night that her mistress put her in a cage, or the time she was flogged naked across her back? Did Mary know that her life, her horrible and haunted life, would be something that we would honor to this very day and for eternity? No. Mary didn't know any of those things. Mary was just a woman with a story. Mary was just like me. Mary was just like you. She was just a woman with a story who decided to tell it. I wonder, what could your story do? What part of yourself can you change by telling your story? What part of history can you shape by telling your story? What part of the world can you impact by telling your story? By taking your pain and giving it purpose. Mary told her story in 1831. She told it orally, and it was transcribed and published, and it has reached the hearts and minds of so many around the globe. It is now 2020. We live in a digital world, and sharing our stories is so much easier for us than it ever was for Mary. All we really need is our smartphone and a little bit of courage. There is no better way to honor our national hero today and every day than by sharing our own stories. Our own stories of being Bermudian, our own stories of being Black, our own stories of being women, our own stories of injustice, our own stories of hope, our own stories of tragedy, and our own stories of triumph. May we all tap into our inner Mary and tell our stories and change the world.